Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mary Jo Vanimba, Education Program Assistant for the Ecological Society of America. Thank you for attending today's ESA Water Cooler Chat, which are informal and interactive presentations on various science, teaching, and working topics. Today's Water Cooler Chat is on guiding effective group work. Let me introduce our host for today. So we have Rachel M. Pigg, who is Assistant Professor of Biology at the University of Louisville in Kentucky. We have Emily S.J. Rauschert, who is an associate professor of biological, ecological, environmental sciences at Cleveland State University in Ohio. And we also have Suann Yang, who is an associate professor of biology at SUNY Geneseo in New York. They're all longtime collaborators themselves. They come to realize that intentionally teaching students about teamwork facilitates more positive work experiences with collaboration in their classes and is less work for the instructor when it comes to dealing with unproductive group dynamics. All right, that's all for me. I'll hand it over to our guest today.
Thanks so much. We really appreciate the opportunity to come and chat with all of you guys today about group work and teamwork in our courses and the things that we have learned both from the literature and from trial and error in our classrooms, right? And getting better through that avenue. But I'm Rachel Pigg. I'm from the University of Louisville, and feel free to follow along with everything that we're going to do today in our worksheet that has all of the things in this slide deck within it. And it'll be a great place to take notes as you proceed through this workshop today. So next slide, Suann. Now, first, just a warm-up question. We would like you to share your thoughts about how you felt about group work as a student. So on a scale from grumpy cat to happy cat, 1 to 5, how did you feel about group work when you were a student? 1 is grumpy, 5 is happy. Looks like a lot of us are putting 3 right in the middle. But a fair bit of us are putting 1, 21%. But 29% are putting 4, so more on the happy side. Suann, where do you think you'd put yourself on this scale?
Thanks, Rachel. Good question. I'd probably be somewhere in a 3 on average, though they tended to be either 1s or 5s for real.
Yes, I agree. It was polarizing generally for me too, 1 or 5, but I started with a even 3. Give it a fair shot. What about you, Emily?
I would have to say it too. I had some terrible experiences as an undergraduate, especially with group work. And I think that helps me relate to students when they also come in a little afraid of group work. I understand, I've been there as well.
Exactly. Well, perfect. Thanks for sharing your responses, friends. I'll share those results with you guys. And now for our next question, what we would like to hear from y'all is how you felt about, or how you feel about managing group work as an instructor. So on a scale from screaming goat to jumping happy goat, where are you on this scale? We have a very nice looking bell curve so far. So most of us are putting 3 again, but 2 has emerged as a popular answer. 4 is a bit popular, and 1 and 5 are less popular.
The beautiful bell curve.
It is a beautiful bell curve. Suann and Emily, how do you guys feel on this scale? Where would you place yourself?
I think I'm maybe around a 4. I think when I started, I was more certainly 2 or 3, I would say. I like to split categories, but I think having learned to resolve some of the problems that arrive, I feel better about it.
I agree. I think I was near a 1 or a 2 initially, but now I feel more confident about it. Now that I've learned a lot from you guys and from the literature about how to do this more effectively. What about you, Suann?
Yes, ditto. I didn't have much practice with facilitating group work when I first got started. I mean, I had zero knowledge of how that should work and just hoped for the best. But now I'm more on the 4 to 5 end of the scale. I think it's one of the joys of being an instructor now.
All right. Great, guys. Thanks for sharing your perspective. It's nice to know where we all are starting at today, right? Feeling about these two things. So let's go to the next slide and think about definitions for what we're talking about, because essentially there's a lot of work in this area, but there's also a lot of terminology. And so the first thing to know is that there's a scale of groups from informal groups to formal groups. So at the informal end, when you're facilitating that sort of group work, really it's just students working together in groups that can range from just 2 students to many, many students in like a study session. And it could be for creating an outcome that's either formally graded or not, right? Most of the time, not. Formal groups are going to be something that might be more common for some of us inside of our classrooms, where we formally assign students into teams, either by letting the students select their own teams or by assigning the teams ourselves, and we expect them to produce a product together. On the other column, we have more terminology. So we've got collaborative learning and cooperative learning. Collaborative learning is a step beyond cooperative learning. So collaborative learning expects students to really work collaboratively to generate something together. So it involves compromise to make progress. Whereas cooperative learning, students can be divided into different roles and work concurrently on different things that they end up putting together, but not necessarily communicating frequently during the process of that, right? So it's more like parallel work. Team-based learning has a lot of really set procedures that go along with it, but is also an excellent high structure teaching practice to implement in your classroom. And problem-based learning can be done with individual students or with groups of students that involves giving them real-world problems to think on. So these are some of the terms that you'll see in the literature. Today, when we use the word group, we mean a kind of all-encompassing category for any time that students are working together in a group. And teams means specifically that they're doing collaborative learning, where they're working together, compromising to produce a project. Next slide, Suann. So now I'm going to give it over to Emily to talk a bit more about how you get buy-in from students who might be feeling like we were, right, as a student, where they might be a bit hesitant to embark on this group work because of past experiences that weren't great, or hearing from others about how it can go wrong. So take it away, Emily.
All right. So one of the first things for establishing good group work or collaborative work is that it's very important to set it up right at the beginning by explaining to students why you're doing this. So you really do need to start off by telling them that work is important and giving some level of detail about why you think it's important. And I do always emphasize that we do this because it helps their learning, and that the evidence supports that it's an important way that people learn. And actually, Suann, could you move to the next slide? One of the other good reasons, though, that helps students understand why we do this is that group learning, collaborative skills, teamwork, whatever you want to call it, it's something that employers want, and it's something that students may have to answer questions about when they have job interviews and are trying to get that dream job. And this is a wide variety of types of jobs that people who are studying ecology or biology might have, and these are little quotes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but definitely for microbiologists, environmental scientists, zoologists, wildlife biologists, people who work in agriculture and food sciences, they all have an aspect of working on teams, working well with others, work effectively together, and communicate effectively. So these are actually skills that employers say they want, that sometimes they're concerned when applicants don't have these skills. So this can help you get a job if you've been on a team, and you can talk about it. So next slide, please, Suann. All right. And then another thing that's important, actually, if you could hit next as well, so we can, yes, exactly. So first of all, we want to share evidence with student about why group work is effective. And one of the things that students worry about at first is that, group work is good for people who are poor students, but group work is not as effective for students who are doing well already. So I always share with them some literature that actually group work helps everyone. And the students who had a hard time understanding benefit from having peers work with them and help them understand. And people who already understood it well will understand it better by explaining it to others. But another aspect of teams that's important to highlight is that it's important when teams contain different perspectives together. And that might be because people in the team think a little differently. So this is a quote. If you could just hit next a couple times, Suann, that would be great. Non-homogeneous teams are smarter. They're better at focusing on facts and processing them together. And diverse teams can be more innovative because you are drawing upon more ideas coming from different directions. And then if you could hit next again. Oh, that's from the Harvard Business Review. But diverse teams can actually do better than high ability students performing alone. And so that's good for students to know, and you need to tell them these things at the beginning so they understand a little more of the why. Next slide. One of the other things that is important to do is also talk to your colleagues that you're doing this, so that you don't have students then going to another class and saying, "Oh, that horrible class, they're going to make us talk to other people." So you want to have your colleagues on board and be ready to collaborate and share with your colleagues about how you're doing group work or teamwork, and so that they can possibly implement it in their own classrooms, or they can share their own experiences with you so that you can together become even better at this. But you want to foster, if you can, a climate where people are working together. And this is very important for student persistence. For science faculty, especially, sometimes it's useful to share the actual papers. And we love graphs. We like looking at graphs. So data might actually be part of how you get buy-in from your colleagues. Next slide. And then one of the other things in terms of getting students to understand the importance of putting their effort behind this is students are more willing to do this if it's a long-term relationship, meaning it's not just for that class. If you have group work, you can totally have short-term groups, but some of the higher performing groups tend to form bonds over even the whole semester, but sometimes it's, a month or half the semester. Students are more invested in working to get along and work effectively if they understand this is a longer term collaboration that leads to sometimes a bigger project or bigger outcomes at the end. Next slide. And then it's very important to allow students to express themselves. And so if you could hit next for the next thing. So we ask for a lot of feedback from our students, sometimes anonymously, so that they can at least tell us what's going on, even if they're uncomfortable with criticizing other people. So we give them ways to do this, multiple ways. And actually, if you could hit for the next tabs also, one of the most effective things is also having past students share their experiences. I share my own past student experience with my students. And then I share more positive experiences since then. But it's much more effective if you have a student who took that class last semester and they can speak to what they learned, or if you have peer TAs. And then another critical aspect is to reflect on how they're doing throughout the semester. Typically, we have students reflect after they've worked together a little bit, and then later, and then also at the end of the group work as well. And show that you are taking their feedback seriously and listening to them by mentioning it in class where possible. And you want to explain from the very beginning that accountability is part of how you do group work. Typically, I have students rate themselves and their group members. It's interesting. A lot of really outstanding students are very hard on themselves, and they think that some of their group members actually did more of the work, and then the group members all tell the opposite story. But it's important for students to know upfront that they will be evaluated by their peers, and that helps them understand that there's some level of accountability for group work as well. Next slide. So here are some wonderful quotes from some of Suann's students about effective group work, and you could even consider, if students allow you to do so, incorporating this on your syllabus or if you have a handout about group work. But some of these I think are very amazing. I have learned that I am capable of completing a long-term project in collaboration with others. So if the student is asked a question like that on a job interview, do you think you could work in a team? The student actually has a concrete experience to talk about for that. And the one on the top, I also am very struck by. I am most proud of how well our group grew together to solve problems. So not just that they made a product, but they learned a different way to process and came together to solve problems. And the student says it's one of the first times in an academic setting I have been part of such an efficient, well-rounded team. And so these are wonderful things to hear from students, especially if it's peer or near peer. Sometimes that can carry more weight. All right, I think next slide. And so there's never going to be a perfect group. And so I'm going to hand over as we talk about how to work on groups, how to form groups, how to work on them. And Suann, I think you're up next.
Thank you, Emily. So yes, there is no perfect group. So to get ready to work on it, we will start with brainstorming what makes winning teams winning, right? So into the chat, name a winning team and then put an explanation for why you think this is a winning team. The responses are popping into the chat and people are interacting with them with the thumbs up and the smiley faces and such. This is great. Like on a sports team, Jean mentioned teams on research ships where everyone knows their job and is trained to do it. Yeah, these are great. Something that is also, I think, clear from the teams that y'all are naming are teams that are not necessarily randomly put together. People are selected in some sort of way. I mean, there's usually a reason for these people to be put together on a team or why we are included or invited to be part of a team. So having some similarly intentional team assignment in our classes could be considered one of the best practices for setting us up for a team that will win. So thank you all for your contributions. We're a winning team. So identifying criteria intentionally for how teams are formed is important. Think about what you want your students to be able to achieve in your classes and develop those criteria around that, not only for the product that is to be produced, but also what they will be doing together, how the culture, what culture you're trying to cultivate. The next is to be transparent about how you are using these criteria to assign people into teams, what sort of heterogeneous or homogeneous matching you're trying to do, whether you're trying to create viewpoint diversity or experience complementary experiences, those sorts of things. And then finally, make sure to initiate a discussion about what the goals are for the group and have them develop that together. Right, so for the next few slides, we're going to talk about the importance of building trust. Trust is something that is needed for a group to reliably function together. Right, so some of the things that we'd like everyone to be thinking about is building trust through this intentional setting of team norms. As instructors, we can facilitate the creation of formalized or written teamwork commitments. These can take the form of guidelines or codes of conduct or contracts. Offering students examples, especially if they haven't had experience doing this, is a helpful thing. We have resources in our accompanying doc to help you if you're not familiar with using these, or if these are something that you do use, there are some additional resources that you might want to explore to see how you might change the way that you adjust what you've been doing. We also want to frame these commitments as living documents because it's important to, like for any group, review on a regular schedule our agreements for working with each other and revising them as situations change, as we better understand our tasks, we get to know each other better, all those sorts of things. We also encourage a public sharing on a course website or other venue so that all groups can see what all groups are agreeing to, so we have full transparency and accountability. A second component of building trust is through meaningful story sharing. So some of the reasons why is to consider that we want to form the basis of empathy for each other and a culture of psychological safety. We want to facilitate each student's abilities to see how differences can be leveraged for being complementary. So for example, students from different hometowns could diversify the knowledge of different ecological landscapes for the team, and that could be super helpful. In terms of how, you could implement regular activities that prepare students for different components or different parts of being a team. So finding common ground, looking for ways to value the diversity of perspectives and experiences, trusting each other as people, real people, and then also helping them to figure out how to have different opinions that are able to exist in the same space. So we have lots of activities that we have found that we've collated for you in the accompanying worksheet handout for ideas for activities that can do these different things. And we encourage you to start with low stakes sharing until before they get to know each other super well, and then progress to activities that could have more risk, which will also help them to build their empathy for each other. Lastly, the last component we want to share with you is to consider how to build trust through fostering a team identity. Try to make things fun at the beginning of the semester. So that way, right away, the first 2 or 3 weeks, they have a positive experience with each other. There's no way to do this part wrong. They're having fun. Consider ways to generate competition among groups, but not within groups. Some of my favorite activities for doing this is to do a share out where groups try to figure out what's a characteristic that every member of the group has in common that makes them special as a group within the class. It could be something as silly as everyone ate pizza on Thursday night to something more informative about who they are as people. I'm a middle child, those kinds of things. It's also really great to be able to find ways that the group can offer something to the class that's unique to them. So these fun facts that represents who they are as people, things that share about what they are interested in, that they have in common in terms of their interests, and any special expertise. So perhaps in some group, one group, you might have a group where all of the members of the group have lots of experience working with spreadsheet programs like Microsoft Excel. Being able to elevate that and let everyone else know that this is something that this group could offer to the rest of the class as their area of expertise is something that will help them to build their team identity as valuable, for the class. So to summarize, there's kind of 3 components here. Think about how you can build trust through prioritizing different ways in which students can value themselves, others, and their team, because everybody at all those different levels brings something important to the class. And now I will switch things over to Rachel.
Thanks so much, Suann. So doing all these things in class, one thing that's really important is you design assignments that facilitate this team building, this trust building, is to make sure that there's lots of moments for you to get feedback about how things are going. So a high structure classroom is one way to do that. High structure classrooms involve organizing both formative and summative assessments that align with the learning outcomes, the collaborative learning outcomes that you want your students to be able to achieve by the end of this group work experience. So high structure involves creating homework assignments that prep students for what they're going to do in class each day, and then giving feedback really timely on those assignments so that they can learn from those assignments. The scope and complexity, as we've mentioned, needs to justify the need for a team. So a simple task doesn't need a team, but a more complex long-term project does need a team to help achieve that end product. Also got to build in moments for individual accountability so that students feel like they need to show up for their teammates, not just because they respect them, but also because you're going to evaluate them based on how they've shown up each day. And of course, opportunities to reflect. As we've mentioned, it's very important for students to think about how far they've come and how far they want to still go. Next slide. And to help build a relationship with you and so that you can help them trust you, it's important to be really transparent about how you're going to grade and evaluate their work. So definitely have realistic expectations in your rubrics that you are really transparent about to your students. For instance, if you expect students to finish something in class time together, show them through an example in class, perhaps, about how you would grade an example student's work in a way that takes into consideration that they had a limited time to put it together. Frequent feedback from you is important, and individual accountability, again, needs to appear in your rubrics and how you ultimately grade students. Next slide. We provide more information about all of those things in our worksheet for you guys to read up on even more strategies about how to design and evaluate your assignments. So let's think about common problems. Often when we are considering implementing teamwork in class, one of the biggest concerns is if team dysfunction happens, how are we going to help those students navigate that conflict and come back together? And so what we have for you today is an activity that we're going to send you into breakout rooms for just about 10 minutes. But before we do that, the first thing I want to ask you is, who do you think is responsible for resolving teamwork issues? Take a moment in the chat to let me know what you think. Team first, then instructor, says Lauren. Initially the team. Ideally the team, but may need instructor help. Everyone on the team, but the instructor should be ready to step in if needed. Instructor has responsibility to set it up well. The instructor and the student's leader. Great, I agree. So I also think that it should be owned by both groups. The instructor creates that environment that helps the team know what to expect and how to work together, learn that skill. And then hopefully, if you've set it up well and if they've achieved those learning outcomes about how to work together through your formative assignments, they'll be able to navigate conflict on their own. But if not, you're there to help. I agree. So next slide, Suann, let's think about a common situation that those of us who have facilitated group work have probably encountered. So it's Monday morning and you get an email and you see the subject line and it says, project team problems. Uh-oh. Let's open up that email, Suann. Next slide. Whoops. So here's the email. It says, hello, I'm quite annoyed at my group's effort. My group is not putting the effort in the same amount that I am, and it's disregarding the fact that it's a group project. Mohammed and I are the only ones who have done the prep and are ready for this next project deadline, but Nico and Pat still have not completed their sections. I sent out an email asking them to do their part, and only one of them responded saying they were busy. This is just the latest problem. They have consistently been waiting until the last minute, and the work that they do isn't good enough. It's not my job to go and correct someone else's work in the group project to this degree, and it isn't fair for my grade to be brought down by their poor work. I'm really fed up, and I hope you can do something to fix this situation. Sincerely, Morgan. So here's what let's do now. Let's break up into groups for the next 10 minutes or so and chat with one another about how we might resolve this problem, how we would respond to this email. So first, together, discuss some possible reasons why this situation might have occurred. Think about some strategies. What can you do now to help this team, and how might you prevent this from happening in the future? And then think about the pros and cons of the strategies that are brought up by your breakout room mates. What could go good? What could go poorly? And these discussion prompts are in your worksheet and also in the chat. Thanks, you guys. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope that you guys had some really great discussions about how to address the students' concerns now, different options to provide them, and also hopefully prevent this problem in the future, or at least limit its possibility of happening. So let's go to the next slide and talk about some advice that we've gleaned from our own experience and the literature that might help. And it might have arisen in y'all's group chats too. The first thing to know is that expect to manage problems. It's just like the perfect group doesn't exist. The perfect curricula doesn't exist that will allow you to avoid having to manage problems. They will happen. It doesn't mean that you've failed in any way. It just means that this is something we've got to learn how to manage and not necessarily resolve all the time. You might just be able to help students feel like they have been heard and help students reflect on what happened in their group that made it dissolve and how they might in the future avoid the things that led to their group's collapse. But you might not be able to get to a resolution with the current group, but still achieve some learning towards your cooperative learning goals. Always balance when you acknowledge those challenges with also affirmations of things that did go well, because even in the midst of a dysfunctioning group, you can still go back to something that did go well for that group in its past. Always share that responsibility, as we've talked about with problem management. There's literature that shows that just offering to help us group resolve a conflict can help that team end up finding a path forward on their own. So they might not even take you up on the offer to help resolve the issue, and yet still feel like they've been heard and that you're there for them. Also, feel free to crowdsource solutions within the class. This can seem like group therapy at some point, but it can also help normalize that the perfect group doesn't exist and that every group in the class has had some sort of conflict, whether it's a very small disagreement or an impasse where they had to reach out to you for help. Next slide, friend. So of course, be really explicit and set realistic learning outcomes and instructions for your students. Put in that high structure with those frequent check-in points so that you can hopefully figure out if things are going wrong early before you get that Monday morning email from that student that's concerned, right? Again, normalize that idea that the perfect group doesn't exist. And in fact, because these employers are looking for students that have this experience with resolving conflict, if they experience conflict in their team and figure out a path forward, they have had an experience that is valuable for their future careers that they can talk about to a potential employer. So it's actually a good thing to have this conflict resolution experience rather than something that, if they experience it, might make some students feel like they have somehow failed, right? It's not true. This is a normal part of any team. And so it's important to experience it and figure out how to navigate together. And of course, teaching students how to manage their own team dynamics through these formative assignments. So perhaps you can walk them through scenarios during the team building process of dysfunctional groups, right? And ask them for this hypothetical group, what advice would you give them if you were their instructor, right? And as the students think about that, they might be able to prep themselves for any future conflict that they might encounter with their own group, right? Next slide. So we can also learn from our own experiences, right? So in our own jobs and our own paths in the classroom, we can think about our past experiences and reflect on what went wrong. And if we could go back and do it again, how might we make it turn out better? Or if it turned out great, maybe there's even something else that we could have done even better, right? Just critically think about those past experiences, good and bad. Offer grace to ourselves as we're figuring it out, right? There's going to be always ways to improve a class. It's an unending and exciting process to continue to innovate our curricula to try to come up with new ways to do these things. So seek out evidence-based teaching strategies, come to workshops like this, right? Or give workshops yourself. I learned a ton in my breakout room from you guys. So even giving workshops are a great avenue to learn new skills. And reach out to buddies, either folks that you've met today or folks at your home institution or any other professional network that you're a part of. Build teammates that you can troubleshoot with and share those Monday morning emails with to help you figure out how to navigate these situations. Next slide. And so your homework from our workshop today as you move forward is to think about how you're going to implement this in your own course, kind of the changes that you think you might make in future semesters. What do you want to focus on to improve next time? For example, what new trust building activity do you want to implement in your class? What tools from this session will help you improve in this focal area? Be sure to spend some time with our worksheet and check out all the links that are just so helpful from not only other ecologists who've worked in this space, but also the business world has done a lot of work on how to manage teams, and they have some really great trust building exercises, for example, that you might want to adopt to your classroom. Also think about specific learning objectives around teamwork, how you can really interleave it into your course, because if students see a core ecology concept learning objective right beside a collaborative learning objective, they'll see it as just as important as those core ecology concepts that we are trying to teach our students, and not something that's not important because it's a, quote, soft skill that's actually really hard to master. And of course, identifying a buddy at your home institution is important, if you can. Next slide. So as you guys brainstorm and do this homework afterwards, please share what you've decided to do and other resources that you've found that relate to some of the things that we've talked about today. We created a Padlet. There's also a link to it in your worksheet. Fill that up so that can become a community resource for all of us that attended the workshop today. Next slide. And so as we're leaving, we have one last question for you. So now that we've talked a little bit about it, recognizing that we're still on a journey to figuring out how to implement teamwork in your class, how ready do you feel to try something new in teamwork in your class? Oh, this is exciting. I'm seeing a lot of 4s and 5s. There's still people at 3 and 1, and that is just fine. It can be scary. But for you folks at 3 and 1, let us know how we can support you. We're going to have our contact information on this ending slide. Please do reach out and let us know what else we can do to help you get to 3, 4, and 5 on this scale. And thanks everybody for taking time in your busy schedules to come chat with us about teamwork. I've learned a lot from you, and I'm hopeful that we can find ways to work together in the future.
Thank you, Rachel, Emily, and Suann, for such a great presentation. We're just going to do a couple of closing statements today. For previous water cooler chats, you can visit the ESA website. For other 4DEE resources, they can be found on the ESA website. Have a great afternoon, everybody.